my assumption is most of you guys, all you guys probably are doing something related with BIM. But my question is, with regards to as-built BIM, who's doing as-built BIM, have done an as-built BIM? Okay, oh, that's good, that's good. With regards to laser scanning, who's using the laser scanning part of that too as well, right? Okay. And so obviously you're working with point clouds. Are you outsourcing the point clouds, or are you actually doing the point clouds yourself? Okay. And then last question, there's only 4 questions here. Who's heard of ClearEdge before today, before this conference? Okay, oh, that's better than I thought. That's good, that's awesome. So just give you guys a little bit of information about ClearEdge 3D. EdgeWise is our flagship software. The company is founded in 2006. We are recognized experts in automated feature extraction. And to kind of elaborate on it just a minute, we actually developed the very first set of automated feature extraction tool sets for aerial LiDAR back in 2000. Since then, we created 3 tools. From there to the end of 2005, one other guy not named Kevin Williams created one in 2008. It's very similar. So Kevin is really strong in this arena, very good math skills. The secret sauce for our software is obviously the automation. That's really what we're known for. And one of the things that when we first pushed out the software, we actually released EdgeWise Building back in 2009. Kevin left the U.S. government defense contractor, quit his job, went out, was going to build the software. He estimated about 12 months to have this done because he already got to 2.5D with aerial LiDAR. He figured the other half D should be pretty easy to do. 3.5 years later, we finally have a product. So my job was when the product was ready to actually go out and start selling the software. One of the things we noticed was the architectural community, in terms of scanning, the market was very nascent. And so we had to switch gears. And just to tell you a quick story about Kevin, in the early days of ClearEdge, we were sitting in an airplane on a tarmac in Orlando, Florida. I had taken him out to a few conferences to kind of get some feel for what potential users are looking for. And so the idea was, if building's not, what do we need to do if building's not ready for us for the automation yet? So during that whole process, we were on the tarmac, getting ready to come home back to DC, and Kevin's just sitting there. He's like thinking. Then he's going like this, and he's like moving his hands, and he's like kind of peeking around. He's got this, so about 5 minutes later, I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Hey, I just figured out pipes." So it was kind of a cool little story about that. But I don't tell you that story because it's a cool story. But one of the things that we learned from that whole timing in the company is it's about workflow. So really, what we've tried to focus on, not so much as we're selling software, obviously, but we want to sell software that users are looking for. It's going to really help the user kind of be more efficient. So that's really what we're doing. On average, we're reducing man hours in terms of modeling 3D from point clouds, 40 to 70%. Actually, it's better. That's conservative as it relates to Revit in some cases. The automation piece is a big part of that. But we've also, as a unique attribute for EdgeWise, but additionally, a unique attribute to the software is actually how we get into Revit. We have a very unique translation getting into Revit. The only software to get into Revit is Revit Family 3D Objects. You link it right in. You can start running your Revit services and whatnot once you get in there. So it's a very seamless, quick, and easy workflow. Go to the next slide here. Let's do this. There we go. So completing as-built BIM. So really want to focus on workflow. And one of the things that, again, not really sure what to expect here. You guys obviously know the benefits of BIM, just kind of sitting in some of the talks that have been going on already. Some of the obvious stuff with communication, improved performance, profits, and so forth, reduce rework, errors and emission. I got to looking at the benefits as the industry sees them for BIM. And coming from the BIM standpoint, we see that more like BIM is coming from a design perspective versus an as-built. Again, it could be our limited exposure to the design community for BIM, but basically the benefits are very similar or the same for either as-built or design. So one of the things that looking at everything, BIM software in general is not designed for as-builting. It's really designed to do design work, and so really it comes down to what workflow are you going to use to best fit into into what you're doing to get into Revit applications like Revit for 3D modeling. And so the big challenge is the workflow. So I got a couple slides up here, but Matt did a good job going over basically scanning, and there's other guys who talked about that this week. But basically, the first step in the whole process is actually data collection. And it's well recognized that laser scanning is probably the best practice in the industry, giving you very accurate collection of as-built data. So there's a ton of advantages, and Matt spoke to some of those. Some of the advantages, you can reconstruct real world in 3D. It captures everything in your scene, which you don't have to go back to the sites. Once you're in the office, you got the data, you just pull up the data, it's right at your fingertips. It creates a dimensionally accurate 3D model from which from the 3D point cloud. And one thing is the scanning creates the point cloud and not the BIM model. But the point cloud is actually used to create that BIM model. So a local Australian contractor, I think here in Melbourne, basically this is their workflow process to cycle through how they approach the scan to BIM workflow. And the first one obviously is the data collection. And this is just an example of where all the scanner positions are. So you have to set that up depending on the complexity of the project and what you're trying to collect, the data you're trying to collect. The next one is the data, which you get a raw point cloud, and this is an example of that. It's not actually a model, but it's a point cloud. You can get a lot of measurement data and different things off of that. And then it's data stitching. You know, how do you register that data with all the scans that you collect, position to position to position? You need to stitch that together in order for it to have a ubiquitous point cloud to deliver your final product. And this is the final product. This is in Recap, and this is EdgeWise software. And then this is the same model seamlessly gotten into. This project right here took about 10 hours to create for the piping and the steel, from point cloud all the way through to Revit model. And if you're familiar with doing point cloud processing, did I go the wrong way? There we go. Some of the same benefits that Matt brought up for scanning. Speed and accuracy. Now, I'm not the expert in scanning, but I know enough about the benefits that it makes a ton of sense because of the time savings that guys are getting back, reduced costs, and you know, rework and change orders and that sort of stuff. You're able to save a lot. Not so much maybe up. It's more in savings, as Dennis mentioned earlier today. You can create 3D as-built documentation where none exist. And in a lot of cases, you're going to have little to no documentation when you're going into a building that's not even that recently, fairly old. Then as-built comparison, verification, and interface to the Revit services once you get into. So now the piece where ClearEdge fits in, okay? So how do we fit into this? It's been well documented, the advancements of hardware. Faro came out a couple of years ago with a groundbreaking technology. You got a scanner half the size, half the price, half the weight, easy to carry on a plane. There's so many benefits to that. And recently, you've had the handheld scanners like Dot Products, DPI-7, and Mantis has got something coming up. But the Dot Product specifically, you're talking $5,000 for a scanner. Very easy for you to go in, take that, and go. You can go from a point cloud architect and go in and scan something much cheaper, more than likely, than having a couple of interns with us, sketch pad and tape measure. But it's been well known that software side of things has really lagged the hardware in terms of advancements. Recently, the advancements with regards to EdgeWise and also I would say Recap have been huge in terms of particularly Autodesk with that big footprint, giving more of an awareness to the industry about point clouds, and because that's really helped out, I think, a lot of people in the industry. But I think we're getting to the point to where software is actually catching up a little bit to the to the hardware side. Talking about workflow, just want to go over the traditional scan to BIM approach. Basically, you go out and you collect your point cloud, and then obviously you have to use the scanner software or recap to go through and do the registration. And from there, you go into a manual extraction process. And if you haven't played with point cloud very much, it's a very tedious, time-consuming, resource-heavy process to try to come in and trace. Essentially, you're tracing over the point cloud, creating geometry. The new approach, and this is what ClearEdge is proposing, the new approach is take the same point cloud, the same registration process, drop that into an automated feature extraction software like EdgeWise, and then that imports directly into Revit. So what we're doing is the manual extraction, and if you do this inside of Revit manually, then yeah, you have a Revit model at the end, but you're still taking the time to actually having to create that is very tedious process. Taking that and then using a automated approach in which we directly import into Revit, it really cuts down on time savings. And what we're doing here, same thing we saw in aerial LiDAR. Automation was introduced into the workflow. It took a few years, but the economies of scale was depressed low enough to where really the market really grew horizontal. That's really what we're trying to do for the market. Once we introduce automation, we need to refine it, keep working on it, and we're hoping that's going to be the same thing. So automated feature extraction, what is that? And this is a cartoon I saw a couple of years ago, which is kind of like bringing a gun to a knife fight, and the guy says, no, I'm busy, you know. So this is kind of what we see, ClearEdge sees as what automation actually brings to the table in terms of benefit to the industry. This is our portfolio. I'll talk a little bit about the software. I'm going to get some case studies I want to show because I think that's really key, looking at case studies from customers that we're working with. But basically, EdgeWise plants a flagship back in March of 2011. So in 2010, we were sitting down in Orlando. Then in 2012, we put out MEP, the Revit translation. Building came out. We actually rebuilt building last year and pushed that out. And then Structure is the new software this year. It came out early May. So the MEP and the plant both leverage the same piping engine. The big difference is MEP is focused on Revit, square ducting, and all that's going to be included in that, whereas the plant side of things is focusing more on plant 3D, PDMS, industrial type projects. Just to talk about the key features of the software, we're automatically extracting up to 85% of the piping, and to quantify that, we're talking 1 inch in diameter and larger. From less than an inch down to a half-inch nominal size, right now we're pulling out about 25 or 30% of those pipes. And because we're not pulling out all the pipes, we're not saying that it's an end-all. You still have to use user interface. And as an example, we put in a number of QA tools. And we spend as much time on the QA tools as we did with the original extraction algorithms. We felt it and of course the industry told us in the beginning, but we felt it very important for the user to come in and have some level of confidence in how well that if I process a 500 scan project overnight, come in the morning, and I'm sitting there with these pipes, how do I know if they're good or not? And so the QA tools we put in there, we have a table, collects every single pipe we create, and we bring it, and you can see here, you can come in and verify the accuracy and fit of every single pipe. There's some tools in there to really quickly make adjustments. So it's always going to require that user input. We have spec-driven components specific to the plant with valves and flanges. We cannot get valves and flanges into Revit yet, and once that happens, we'll make that change. Spec editor, so we're not piping structure guys. We're software guys, and our forte is really creating an application to manipulate point clouds, create geometry out of that. So we have a number of libraries in the software, but we have the ability for the user interface, for the user to come in and actually input, customize, create, and so forth. We put in a visualization engine, then some of the editing tools. Then the Smartsheet, this is it's turning out to be a very good tool for us. It has a lot of flexibility in terms of how you could use it and finish up your model. And it's actually proven to be a really good tool with a lot of speed behind it. Obviously, we get into AutoCAD, MicroStation, Revit. Intelligent exports, Revit, CADWorks, PDMS, and soon will be Plant 3D here in another week or so. So this is a plant case study, but it doesn't necessarily relate to BIM, but it's kind of, the theme is it's about workflow. So just gonna cycle through this real quick. Ramel Oil did a North Sea oil platform out and they needed a 3D model. This is actually a section of the rig that they had to do. It's about 20 scans I think they took on this particular project. And as you can imagine, tons of structure and piping in there, very congested areas. The key thing they needed was precise tie-in points. And so this is the workflow that they used. They used the ZNF scanner, the LFM to do the registration, EdgeWise Plant, and they took EdgeWise Plant into AutoCAD for two reasons. One, we don't get into Smart Plant 3 directly. But two, what they wanted to do, they actually use the layering capability that we have in the Smart Sheet to take that right into AutoCAD and leverage some of the layering functionality in AutoCAD. So they did this project twice, essentially. It was kind of a test case in the beginning. They modeled it first, traditionally, what I call traditionally, tracing over the points and creating the geometry. Then they come back and redid this with EdgeWise. And so you're looking at a 15-hour versus 60-hour. So the new workflow was only 15 hours. It equates to about 75% reduction in man hours. And one of the things I like about this particular project is what Robert said, because he was just chuckling on the phone, and he says, I couldn't believe it. He says, my guys that I pay a lot of money for, very technical guys, he says, now I can, and he called it smart stuff, but basically they're doing engineering tasks versus remedial modeling, tedious modeling stuff. So here's an MEP case study. This is actually a fantastic case study. Large hospital expansion. I don't know about in Australia, but in the U.S. we've had healthcare projects pop up here past few years, and it's been a ton of projects like that going on. As-built drawings obviously were unreliable. They really needed a really good 3D layout of their MEP system and wanted to document that. So the original bidding process in this particular project, they bid at 18 weeks, 2.5 weeks for scanning. And they ended up collecting 1,400 scans. They did use survey control. I believe it was Trimble Total Station. And then they estimated about 15.5 weeks to do the modeling. Now, the good thing about this project and what's kind of cool about it, we actually came in and we gave them the software. So use the software. If it works, you buy the software. And so they did just that, and they actually finished the project in 4 weeks. And another caveat, another side note to that, the owner had come in and asked for that to come in, wanted to pull it in by 3 or 4 weeks and actually beat that. So here's the workflow that these guys use, and this is the hospital. Registered the data in Ferrocene, and here's the extraction sitting, part of the extraction sitting inside of EdgeWise MEP software. We seamlessly exported that out and brought that directly into Revit as intelligent Revit pipes, and then the final rendered model. So essentially 4 weeks versus the bidding process of 15.5, it's roughly 73–75% time savings on that one. And then for building, we rebuilt building, 64-bit, multi-core, and so forth. So we had to really do a lot of upgrades to that. And we've done a lot of work on that particular tool. And you could automatically extract out walls and windows and basically planar features. And part of that, obviously getting directly into Revit, we also created a Revit plugin that sits inside of Revit, in which you could come in, and once you get into Revit, and point number 3 here, as-built walls, we actually create those walls in Perfect World and EdgeWise. Once we get into Revit, we link our point cloud database, and so basically it's projecting the points onto that wall, and then we have tools on the plugin to actually allow you to refit that wall both vertically or horizontally. So there's 3 options in there: Perfect World, keep the walls plumb, and then actual as-is condition. Then several semi-automated tools, and then the extensive QA. Again, QA is going to be huge, I think, as it pertains to automation. That's basically what our users have told us. This is a new project. It was happened over the summer. It's a large U.S. bank. Wanted to do the headquarters, looking to do an emergency preparedness plan for the building and for the bank, and how they could protect the data and personnel and so forth. So they went in to document that. They had to do this it took them 3 weeks really to scan this project. They only could work 1 day a week. That's on Sunday when the bank was closed. 30,000 square feet. One thing that was really, that Mark had pointed out, particularly here, you can see the many interior spaces here. A lot of spaces. 205 scans. Basically, they didn't model this in traditional, but based on their previous workflow, it was estimated about 24 hours, and they actually did it with EdgeWise, and then took them about 8 hours to process. So again, we're looking at 67% time savings. What Mark said about this, refits the wall either as built or as designed or as built, either way, and he really liked that the feature. The other thing is we have he liked the idea it's able to get into SketchUp pretty seamlessly. And finally, this is a brand new product. I'm really excited about this actually. This is not automated in the way that the rest of the software is. In fact, it's automated, semi-automated, but the way we've built this tool, we think is best in class. And in our approach to this, we are faster, at least on the projects that we've done so far, our clients have done. We can model steel, wood, and concrete. So one of the things we do in this particular project here, you can see there's a lot of structure, particularly on that platform there. You could go in, and the idea is you don't have to clean the point cloud. So other software, you have to come in, you have to region out the points, flip it, region out again, and say, okay, fit the element there. Whereas what we're doing, we're actually doing it inside the full point cloud. And we actually have a really good set of tools. About 80% of the time, right now, we're fitting where it's in proper orientation. There are some things that we're going to tweak on it, but right now it's working really well. This project here took about 1 hour and 45 minutes to actually create the structure on this project. And once we brought it into Revit, I think it was 161 steel elements for that. And again, QA is a big part, right? So here's our smart sheet for the steel. And basically everything we create is listed in that steel as we create that. And you can see we're split screen, 2D view and 3D view. And you can look at either one and zoom in, but what we see here, we go ahead and create the steel in 3D view. We can see exactly what it looks like in 2D view against the points on that piece of steel. And then, so the idea here is you kind of work through and QA this as you build your project. Direct integration with Revit, and also we can get into CAD as well. Then we have a case study on this. This is a brand new case study, and these guys came in. They're already users of EdgeWise, and they wanted to test out the software before they upgraded with structure. And they had already done this project in another software. But this is University of Kentucky in the U.S. Football stadium. They want to document as is conditions. A couple things to point out on this one. Many of the beams and columns were obsolete because the stadium was that old, based on the age of the stadium. So they didn't have anything in the library. So they go in and create a lot of custom parts. Took 4 days to do the scanning. 140 scans were collected using the P20. Traditional modeling, and again, they had already modeled this, but they wanted to test the EdgeWise software. Took them 155 hours to use the same guy, same metrics, and so forth. They actually modeled this inside of Revit, and not necessarily with another scanner software. And then EdgeWise came back and remodeled this, and it took them 90 hours to do the same thing. And I want to point out this was actually with the beta version of the software, so a couple of the tools were not there at that time. But still, it's a 42% reduction in man hours to create that. And Brian can be a tough customer, and he expects a lot, which is good. I like that in my customers. But one of the things he really liked was the ability to provide essential validation, as he called it, for the model. Then lastly, this is probably a showcase case study for us. It's actually a really nice case study. And I have if I could get over here on here, I actually have a Navisworks I'm going to open up real quick. But this particular project, there we go, it's a huge chemical plant and they want to do a computational fluid dynamic analysis, dispersion model for this project. In case any combustible vapors or gaseous vapors got escaped, they want to have a plan on how to handle that. And so everything in this project, they had to model, the entire project. Facility, it was completely operational, and so they're on a deadline. 80% of the pipes that were in that facility were 1 inch in diameter, and there's about 20,000 pipes on that particular project. 17 days to do the scanning. 436 scans were collected using the Faro scanner. And this is an interesting project. So we met Keith at SPAR. We've been talking to him prior, but he hadn't committed, and he was using other software. He had 3 guys working on this project, and he took 1 guy off because he was up against a tight deadline and gave EdgeWise a try. And that guy was doing this, and he ended up going back and modeling the whole thing in EdgeWise. And let me see if I can pull this over. This is this model in Navisworks. Just kind of do a quick walkthrough. But in this particular project, he actually used EdgeWise to create the 10 model full floor. We do have a ground surface extraction tool. He created all the piping valves, all of the steel. He didn't create the vessels. He created the vessels in another software. But basically, in this particular project, there's a ton of pipes, ton of elements. So it's really a showcase using a lot of the functionality for the ClearEdge software. So when they went back and did this with, where's my mouse? There it is. With EdgeWise, it only took 370 hours, and they modeled everything essentially. It's 47% time savings compared to the other, and just Keith's a good old country boy. If you guys are in the States and you see a guy down south, and they're just a straight shooter basically. EdgeWise is 8 times faster for pipe, and he estimated twice as fast for structure. So what are our users saying? Kelly Cohn, many of you probably know him. He was over here recently at the RTC event. Huge step forward, beyond impressed from the Precision Point guys. And then Bowman Consulting was right there in DC with us. It should be in every toolbox, essentially. And I was going to be brave and actually do a live demo, but I think we're tight on time. So, but if you guys want to see a demo, I'm happy to show that to you at some point. So that's it. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you very much.